Die of Death's fashionably late update dropped a lot of fun reworks and new abilities, and with my depressing amount of playtime, I was on it within the minute. But instead of playing the actual game, I wasted the first 2 days of the update playing its FNaF clone instead. This is why. A 24-hour contest, seeing who can end the night with the highest amount of power. When I saw this message, my fate was immediately sealed. The prize was only 500 Robux, which is like $5, but this wasn't about the money. It was about being the most green man to ever play the game.
I am Dobo Dying Dead.
If you're unfamiliar with FNaF terms, a green run is trying to beat the game while trying to conserve as much power as possible. Before we can green run though, we have to understand the game itself. One night at Dobo's is incredibly simple. You have to survive until 6 AM using 2 doors and a mask, and there are only 4 characters. Closing the doors uses power, and putting on the mask uses up oxygen. If your oxygen drops to 0, you die, and if your power drops to 0, you can't use your doors and you will die the next time someone attacks your door. Since all of the characters except Dobo don't have official confirmed names, I'll just make some up. Bluey and Dobo are both door characters and function nearly identically. When either one of them attacks you, they will appear in their respective doorways, with Bluey in the left door and Dobo in the right door. To deal with them, all you have to do is close the door on them. Once you hear banging on the door, it's safe to open the door again. If you fail to close the door in time, they'll kill you. The only gameplay difference between these two besides spawning in different doors is that Bluey attacks you more often than Dobo. When Wormy attacks you, they will spawn in the center of the office and the lights will begin to flicker, similar to FNaF 2. To deal with them, you have to put on your mask before the lights stop flickering or they will kill you. Last and certainly least, we have Ghosty. Ghosty will spawn somewhere around your screen and make a ghost sound. All you have to do is move your mouse over them and they'll vanish. If you take too long to send them away, they'll kill you. Now that you understand how each character works, we can start going into my green run attempts and the learning process. You'll notice that I'm using a timer in the footage, and this served 2 purposes. 1, to gauge how long I could stall in order to squeeze out as much power as possible, and 2, to know when the end of the night is coming so that I don't waste power on extra door closes. Upon rewatching the footage of my first run, I found that both of the door characters would appear at the door and smash their face on it after 3 seconds, meaning their kill timer is 3 seconds. In fact, every character's kill timer is 3 seconds. These kill timers are the entire base of our green running strategy. It means that we don't have to keep the door closed or have the mask on the entire time that we're being attacked, because as long as we keep track of who spawns when and act as we cross the 3-second threshold, we're good. When I was first applying my knowledge of kill timers on the door characters, I was noting the time when either door would be attacked, adding 3 to it, and closing it just before it would hit that number, since I was accounting for reaction time potentially adding about 200 milliseconds. Most runs died at 12 AM since the hardest part is getting used to timing door closes while you're in a run, and the first hour is also the easiest hour to save power on, so restarts don't hurt as much. But Dobo, this freaking loser, probably caused about 80% of my deaths because he's much less predictable from him spawning less often, and he also crawls on the floor, so he isn't visible when you wear the mask. Even with Dobo being annoying, using this strategy, I got a humble 37.7% green run, which allowed me to claim first place. At this point, multiple green runs were submitted, and my run was 7% better than the first submission, but only about 2% better than the former record. But this run was far from perfect. You see, in this run I had Wormy, Bluey, and Ghosty spawning at the same time very frequently. While this helped me get the timing down for dealing with the door character and Wormy at the same time, it wasn't very optimal power-wise to have Wormy attacking with a door character. Wormy spawning meant I would have to close the door a little bit earlier than I typically would since I still need to move my mouse to the mask button. This combination of early door closing and extra mouse movements meant that I was unnecessarily bleeding a lot of power. I would maintain this combo for many runs after, since at the time I thought this was the norm and didn't realize there was a way to change when characters spawned. But other than that, my less than ideal performance was down to having poor timing with closing doors, and I would continue to hone in on this skill. But about an hour later, the entire course of the contest would be altered by a horrifying development. The mobile players arrived. Let me explain. Mobile players were problematic to me winning this contest for a multitude of reasons. On PC, you have to physically move your cursor towards the buttons, meaning you can only do one thing at a time, making it extremely difficult to optimally deal with door attacks that are either occurring at the same time as another threat, or even worse, offset by a few hundred milliseconds. Keep this in mind as we look at this clip from a mobile player. What the fuck? Yeah, okay, so mobile is touchscreen, making it possible to close both doors at the same time and also close doors while you're wearing the mask. You know, two things you can't do on PC. This meant that playing on mobile gave you an inherent advantage since you can multitask, and you don't have to fight for your life when something like this happens to you. So you know, about like 90% of the difficulty of the mode is just removed and everything I do is meaningless? Okay, I didn't actually care and I don't have anything against the mobile players, but you gotta admit, this is some bullshit. Regardless, this actually kinda helped me as it just gave me a reason to push myself. If I wanted to beat the mobile players, I would have to get greener. I barely beat the mobile player's record with my 39.8% run, but I was still stuck with the bluey and wormy sync, and I was still wasting a lot of power having doors closed for up to an entire second. And also because I didn't have Spotify Premium. Spotify ads were the true secret fifth enemy. I started working on closing the doors with more precise timing, and 90 minutes later, I crossed the 40% power threshold and beat my old run by 4%, which was huge. I was timing my door closes better, so the main thing to fix, besides Spotify ads, was bluey and wormy syncing. I called it here for the night because, believe it or not, staring at flashing lights for multiple hours is very taxing on your eyes. At this point, the contest had been extended and would last about 6 more hours than initially planned to accommodate people in different time zones, but also probably because things were ramping up quickly, which meant that we would have to get even greener. The first day had ended with me at the top, but things would quickly go south. The next day, my record had actually been beaten around 4 times by the time I started doing some more green runs. When I first started doing some, I noticed that bluey and wormy weren't synced at all, and were spawning much later. And that's when I had discovered what you could call a tiny kink in how the game works. The day before, I had accidentally reset bluey's AI level back to 0 when clicking back into the game too fast. But when I set him back to 25 and started the run, bluey and wormy weren't synced. But the more I played, the closer bluey would get with wormy until they eventually synced up, and then it hit me. The more time you spend in the mode, the earlier that each enemy spawns. I had been attempting the mode for hours the day before, which meant that I had them spawning at their earliest, which is why they were synced up. That's when I also realized that changing their AI level also resets this and makes them spawn at their latest, meaning I can get them to desync. Using this knowledge, I opted to sync Bluey and Ghosty so I could differentiate between Bluey and Dobo spawning by using Ghosty as a warning. I kept Wormy and Dobo on their own separate timer since less combo attacks meant more power saved. But desperate times called for desperate measures, as the mobile players were still clinging on to first place. I needed to get greener than green. This is when I would employ an extremely advanced mathematical technique that even the most seasoned of green runners struggle with, and even fewer Roblox players could manage. With Calculus 3 under my belt, I could persevere, but it would require superhuman levels of focus. I used a discrete strategy called counting to 3. This method worked, even better than using the timer in fact, since you don't have to stare at the timer and can focus on the game. I wasn't just simply counting to 3 though, I was using an extremely niche method few people have mastered. The Mississippi method. To account for reaction time, I had been paying attention to when the office lights began to flash, since that meant either a door character or Wormy was attacking. The moment I saw the flash, I could mentally prepare for when a character would appear in the doorway and immediately start counting to 3. The timing required to green run this mode made it more akin to a rhythm game than anything. And at this point, I had gotten so used to the intervals that I was reopening the doors before the game had displayed that they left.
Mississippi.
The only flaw with counting to 3 was that any distractions meant that you could mess up the timing and kill a run, like when I forgot to silence my phone. Mother! I got this weird Golden Freddy equivalent a little bit after that, so that made up for it.
What the fuck are you? Hello?
But as the hours passed, I kept dying, and I still hadn't submitted a run. The end of the contest was an hour away. A mobile player still held the top spot, with a PC player only barely able to cross the 50% mark. So was that it? Was I no longer green? Was this contest doomed to have a mobile player take the crown? No, it wasn't, because I had one last trick up my sleeve. I'm Asian. I beat the top run with minutes to spare. Except that's not at all what happened. I was doing a little thing called lying! That's what you would have seen if you were looking at the Discord, aka someone who was losing. Let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night. And when you move, fall like a thunderbolt. Sun Tzu. I didn't want to make it look like a complete stomp, even though in reality it really was. Here's what actually happened. I had gotten a green run of 55.3% 7 hours before the contest ended. To put how insane this power management was into perspective, it outpaced the natural power decay of 24% over the whole night. It was so green. I had already eclipsed my own personal best by 11.5%, and this run already surpassed the current holder of first place by more than 5%. Since there was so much time remaining, I decided that I would hold off on submitting my run. This served two purposes. One, to make my opponents complacent, and two, to not expose my strategies. You could see this as cheap or cowardly behavior, but I'm not going to be feeding my opponents strategies on how to beat me. I mean, I just have to gatekeep the groundbreaking strategy of counting to 3. Of course, I made sure to troll the event host a little bit while still telling the truth. I had surpassed the 50% threshold, but without uploading my run, nobody knew by how much. I could have surpassed it by 0.5% or 10% for all they knew. But without any video proof, they could brush this off as a lie from the guy who peaked at 44% and wanted to attempt to remain relevant in the running. I was still doing runs after achieving this really good run, and I even managed a higher score of 56.7%. But it was clear the only person I was competing against was myself. I submitted the 56.7% run 25 minutes before the contest ended. I won the competition and earned 500 Robux and the rad roll in the Discord. But more than that, I had prevailed against the mobile players and showed that PC players were built different. And most important of all, I was the most green person to touch Die of Death. No hate to any of the mobile players, I was just a little tilted since I have an Android. Since the Die of Death Greenrun War, One Night at Dobo's got a hard mode, and with that, a new contest has opened up. 425 hard mode with 50 desktop DOMs, which makes the game look and sound like this. If you want to try to win this one, go ahead. The prize is only about 10,500 Robux and 2 weeks Nitro, which is like over $100. It ends on the 29th of July, so good luck to everyone running.
I'll be watching.